your own immune system, maybe even your mental health. And also, Chad, talk about your story too. So why don't you let us know a little bit of background about yourself before we get started.
Yeah, so thank you so much for having me, Mike. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Just a little bit about me. So, I started this journey into a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. And honestly, it started, I want to say that my son, my son is 7 years old and he has autism. He was diagnosed about 5 years ago. And I want to say he kind of led my wife and I to a whole food, plant-based lifestyle. And this is kind of how we got there.
Okay.
When you kind of go through this journey of getting a diagnosis of autism, it's not a 1, 2, 3 step process. There's no quantifiable metric that says someone has autism.
There's no test where you're yes or no.
Exactly. What the doctors do is they rule out every possibility that could be causing the symptoms, and then they rely on behavioral tests to give a result to say that you have autism. So, and my poor son had been poked and prodded more times than I care to count.
Yeah.
Brain scans. I mean, you name the test, you name the doctor, we went and seen him. And, at the end of it, we realized that, there isn't any, the only thing that you can do is love your child. And,
right.
And that's what your son has led us to, because right. In the beginning, we started going on this process of trying to figure out what caused autism, why our son Jackson. And when we went down that road, we uncovered it. We learned a lot about the systems in place. And actually that's part of the information that we took from that led us to this lifestyle.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we learned that, our son doesn't need any fix because he's not broken. He needs our love,
right.
Just like any other kid. And in part of the learning process that we did, and in embracing our son in the way that we did, it's brought us closer to him. It's brought us, it's created a whole new relationship for us. And part of what we learned was our relationship with food and what that looks like. And because the idea comes from unconditional love.
Right.
People who need our help and everything in our life that needs our help has to come from a place of unconditional love.
So how does that, like, from someone that changed their lifestyle, because you changed your lifestyle, well, I did too, we all did at some point, how did that unconditional love factor into your seeking out and changing your lifestyle to a more of a plant-based and no animal product type of a lifestyle?
Yeah, so when we dug deeper into, what's the safety of our food look like? What's the safety of our water and things like that, right? Learned a lot about factory farming. And, just kind of segue a little bit into what's going on today with the COVID-19. It's not a surprise. Now, I'm not a scientist. I'm not a doctor, but to me, it's a bit of common sense.
Right.
When you look at factory farming, for example, we cram animals into these cramped space where they're literally waiting in their own feces, each other's urine most of the day. And then they get sick. We pump them full of antibiotics. 80% of the antibiotics used today goes into factory farming. And then when we go into consuming those things,
that's actually, before you go on, that antibiotic thing is something we've talked about recently before, myself with others, in that the fact you don't know if the animal products you're buying originated from sick animals. And the fact that you're saying that 80% of all antibiotics are given to animal farming operations, the animals probably are sick, and yet there's no way to tell if it was or was not sick when you're buying that product. So if you were to assume anything, like, you should never assume anything, the assumption would be you're buying a product from a sick animal, right?
And for sure they've been pumped full of antibiotics. I mean, that's just, they have to.
Yeah.
There's no way around that. So to me, when I started looking into what that looked like, and we don't have to get into, chickens, for example, they genetically modify chickens entirely nowadays for the breast meat bigger.
Right.
And that causes a litany of health issues with the chickens. And I mean, we could go on and on about all that, but the basics of it is that, when we look at how we treat, Mother Nature will respond to how we treat it.
Mm-hmm.
And And there's no surprise that we've had, and this isn't the only, health-related illness we've had from animals. I mean, this is just one. I mean, look at mad cow disease,
Right.
swine flu. There's the avian flu, and I mean, the list goes on and on.
Yep. Yep.
Most go back to animals, and it goes back to the way that we've been treating them. So to me, it's just common sense that we can't treat our planet and other living beings like this. You can't create them to make them to suffer and then make them sit in these unsanitary conditions for so long and then expect us to just come out clean and healthy. I can't see that as being clean and healthy.
Right. It's a disconnect for sure. Yeah. Yeah. So that was a big factor for you?
Yeah, it was, so that, like, when I started really embracing, because I got to tell you, there's some serious power in the idea of unconditional love. Like I said before, when we stop trying to figure out our son Jackson and figure out how to fix him and embrace the love, I mean, everything completely changed. I mean, he started talking more, because he's nonverbal and he has social and sensory challenges.
Mm-hmm.
He started engaging with us more.
Yeah.
When I came to the doors, he would run up to me versus before it was as if I wasn't even home. It's a whole different relationship we built just on unconditional love. And when I saw the power of that, I found it important to say, well, how can I apply this to things I've learned in this journey of trying to figure things out?
Mm-hmm.
And that just makes perfect sense. Like, why won't we just move to a plant-based diet? And then you look at, I mean, there's a great documentary that you showed in the festivals, The Game Changers.
Yeah.
I mean, premier athletes, champion athletes are using plant-based diets and becoming champions. So the argument that you don't get enough protein or you get plenty. I mean, I'm a highly active person. I work out every day, 6-7 days a week. I eat only plants, mostly whole food plants, and I feel amazing. I feel more clear of mind. I'm 42 years old and I've got more endurance than when I was 18.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just crazy to say that you can't do it. In fact, you use a lot less resources. These factory farms, and that's another thing too. You look at all the resources these factory farms use. The amount of water and food it takes to feed a cow or a pig or a lot of chickens is many more times than what you need to feed people.
It's not efficient. That's correct. It's not efficient at all. Yeah.
But we've allowed these industries to kind of take over our thought process, but with the marketing and lobbying, and it becomes culture, which it has been, I think, for many of us. Many of us had to transition to a whole food plant-based diet, where honestly, it should have just been given into us from day one, but they've kind of taken over. And it's important for those of us who have gotten to that space to help other people understand who want to listen. Because you only have people that really want to listen.
Yeah, well, I mean, these are all good reasons that you're bringing up, and I think that more and more people are embracing them. And I think that everyone says that they want to treat others well. They love animals. So I think that the more anybody digs into this, the more they realize there's no choice really in moving away from these animal products. You have to, and even people who say, well, I don't buy animal products or food that was raised on factory farms, you still end up, like, I don't even want to talk about the psychological aspect of this. One of them is you still end up killing an animal against its will, and it has that rush of adrenaline or whatever goes through someone's body when it knows it's about to die, because there's always that point, and it's going to die against its will, and then you consume that, so that becomes part of you, and that's not a good thing. Yeah.
It's funny you say that. There's people that will argue that, well, they can kill in humane ways. Okay, well, put the shoe in the other foot though. Like, what's a humane way for you to die? Or a loved one. What's the most humane way for your loved one to die for someone else to survive? And I don't know a single person who will say, well, this is the humane way to do it, because there isn't.
Yeah.
For someone else to live. And when that's not a necessary action to take, when you can go this other route and it's more efficient from a process and procedure standpoint, it's more efficient to do plant-based agriculture over animal agriculture. There's no argument for that, and not to mention we're breeding these animals into existence to suffer and die. And another point I just would like to bring up briefly is the dairy industry. People think that dairy is very harmless. But what people don't understand is these cows are forcibly impregnated. So you're
Right.
basically raping a cow to impregnate them. And then their calves are ripped away from them at birth. Now, to keep them, and if you've ever seen a pregnant woman, right, they kind of have that, usually have that little bit of a waddle. I remember my wife with my 2 kids had a bit of a waddle.
Yeah.
It's highly uncomfortable for her,
Yeah.
as more than anything, it's highly uncomfortable at that stage. These cows are forced to live that way their entire life. And a cow
Yeah.
can then only live for about 6 years until they have to kill it for its meat. A cow can normally live 20 plus years. So that's one. But that's not a humane way to treat these animals. It's quite harmful to those beings.
Oh yeah,
Um,
for sure. And like you say, these cows are kept pregnant most of their lives, at least the usable life that a farmer considers them usable for. And then when that baby is removed, they know it. They know that that baby was taken from them. They kept that baby in their body, just like any other mother would keep a baby for months on end, but know something happened, and they never get over that. And then that also is part of what you're consuming, right? That type of emotion, it's not good at all.
I would challenge anybody listening to watch a video, pull up on YouTube a video of a cow being separated from their calf, and the sounds that they make and the actions they take. If you have any humanity in you, you're going to feel sad for that cow.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a humane thing. It's just not. It just can't be.
Yeah, let me ask a question about more on the plant end of things. What are your feelings about, different processes for growing plants? I mean, because there's all kinds of processes that involve pesticides, herbicides, insecticides, and then there's organic and non-chemical ways of growing things. What are your thoughts about all those different things?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Early on, when my wife and I were doing research into the safety of our food, pesticides and herbicides is a big one. Because we were trying to figure out what causes autism, and nobody knows.
Right.
Figure it out ourselves. And I can say this, that glyphosate's a big. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's a herbicide that goes on our food.
Yes, glyphosate Roundup, the active ingredient Roundup. Yeah.
And they genetically modify these foods to withstand that chemical, so it can kill the weeds and not kill the plant.
Mm-hmm.
And although I didn't find a lot of information that really led to harmful effects of the actual genetically modified foods, not to say that that's not the case, but what I have found more and more evidence about is the glyphosate. It is highly carcinogenic to people. And the fact that we're all seeing our crops with it, and then they try to tell us that it's safe, that to me just can't be the case.
I agree. I tend to agree with that. Yep.
And then if you do a little more digging into the processes and procedures for the FDA and how they verify these things are safe, most times they rely on the company who produced the chemicals and produced the products to give the information to them to say whether it's safe or not.
Grade their own tests.
They grade their own. It makes no sense to me, like how that's even allowable. When I found that out, I was completely floored. I said, well, how do we know for sure it's safe? And the fact is, but there's an unprecedented case. I want to say a year or two ago in San Francisco, there was a gentleman who worked closely with that chemical glyphosate, and he actually was one of the first. He actually was the first person to successfully sue. I think it was the company that produces it.
Monsanto, I believe. Yeah.
And he won. Won the case because he proved that it is carcinogenic, which has been contrary to the information that's been put out.
Yeah. And to give like my version of your summary too, like another way of looking at it, because it's hard for people to understand this thing. They just hear glyphosate, they hear Roundup, they hear Monsanto, like the devil. I think people say it, but they don't understand the process. Like you described it well. Like the way I describe it is that it's a chemical, I think you said this too, that should and will non-selectively kill any plant it touches, including grass, like woody shrubs, and everything will be killed off. So it's a great killer of plants. So somebody got it in their mind somewhere, well, hey, what if we could get it to just kill the plants we don't want and get it to allow to remain living the plants that we do want? So that's the whole idea behind the GMO, Roundup Ready, soybeans, other things. Is most of the food that you buy has probably been farmed in this way, unless it's truly organic and chemical free. So when they're growing, like, let's say soybeans or corn, they'll grow it like they normally do. And then when it comes time to weed, they won't selectively do anything. They'll spray the entire field with the Roundup. So the way the Roundup works, so the glyphosate works, is it gets absorbed and sucked into the plant, sucks it in to its system, and that's how it kills the plant. But in this case, like you said, they've engineered these crops that we eat to not die. They live and they have that component in them. Now, when you ask this and you tell this to the people who work with these companies, they say, oh, well, the plant neutralizes this chemical, right? It stays alive and it neutralizes. But we all know, if you read the bottle, if you read the warnings on the bottle, it says, like, don't let this get on your skin. Don't drink this stuff, poison. So there's got to be some, I mean, in my mind, just thinking logically, there's got to be some remnant of that in the plant, if not a lot of a remnant of that chemical. And then you're eating it. And I don't know of any long-term studies that have ever taken place before that was released that tested someone, like, let's say, exclusively eating food that was farmed in that way versus organic or chemical free methods. So we don't know the difference. We may never know the difference. I think that those companies don't want that information out there. They will usually, if you ever question them about this, they'll say, oh, this allows people to feed the world like this. But it really allows, I think, world destruction, because anytime you use chemicals, right, in agriculture, they run off, they get into the water supply. Even if they don't do anything else, they contaminate all the water. So that's destroying the world right there. And and also, so you guys are aware, this stuff originated, correct me if I'm wrong, Chad, but I think it was the early 90s is when this stuff started hitting the market, right? So anything grown before the early 90s never came in contact with that chemical. So if you've seen stuff that's spiked up since the early 90s, it may have some kind of relation to this Roundup glyphosate chemical, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think it was like 95 or 96 is when they,
mid-90s. Okay.
One of the first things they started giving it to was they were doing it on cotton, and they were giving the cotton seeds to cows for that they were spraying the stuff with and doing the GMO cotton seeds with. And they started feeding the cows that we eat. And you're absolutely right. And it's interesting you talk about Monsanto or companies that produce this type of stuff. The thing to think about is trust. Right. What kind of trust do we have? And if you do a little homework on that company, Monsanto specifically, they were a co-partner in making Agent Orange back in Vietnam. And Agent Orange was supposedly safe. And then all these veterans were dying from Agent Orange poison. So, I mean, so it's about trust for me. And when you do the homework, there's a huge question mark when it comes to that. So I would just be cautious.
And they've changed the name. I believe they're now Bayer Chemical or something like that. Because they're moving away from that name because of the trust issue that you bring up.
Right, and Bayer's trusted because it's like aspirin that you can give to kids and all this stuff. I thought that was an interesting merger when that happened. And I said, there's a little bit something fishy there, and that makes sense that they would try to do that.
Yes.
And they've been around for over 100 years. A lot of people don't know that too. Monsanto's been around for I think since 1912 or something like that.
Okay. I also want to mention something else that I am skeptical of or curious about, and that is the gluten-free foods and the whole gluten-free movement. There are some people out there that do believe that, yes, there is celiac disease. We know that, okay? And people who have celiac disease need to avoid gluten. There's no question about that. I don't know if we're really going to get into that in this video, but for people who don't have celiac disease, which is most everybody, people are still going gluten-free, saying, oh, I feel better, I have a gluten sensitivity, which is a real thing, right? People are sensitive to it, but the question is why? And I think that some of the evidence that's out there says that it may be because it's not organic. It's full of chemicals, full of glyphosate. Most all of the wheat is, and the gluten. What do you think about that?
It's funny you mention that. Wheat farms specifically, if you look at how much glyphosate they use on their crops, I mean, they use many more times of the glyphosate they use in most other crops,
Okay.
because it can withstand it, and it's just easier to kill the weeds. So they get doused with it much more than everybody else, than most of the other crops, and it makes sense. And then when you look at the gluten sensitivity, well, that's where a lot of the gluten is coming from, is the wheat crops.
Right.
You add it all up, and it's interesting you say that too, because I've talked to more and more parents I've talked to that have children with autism. Although it doesn't have a lot of effect on our son, there's a lot of kids that it affects if they remove gluten out of their diet, their behavior drastically modified.
Right.
Just less breakdowns, less outbursts of just not being.
Really? Okay. So that's something that is considered known, that is common, right?
It is, and it's not for everybody that has every child that has autism, but there are more and more parents that we've spoke to that will say that if you remove gluten entirely, it makes a big difference. We've tried it and it didn't really make a difference with our son, but I can tell you that more and more parents will swear by it.
Okay. Well, it's tough. I mean, like, I feel like with so many things, and I don't know about autism, you know way more about this, but with so many things, when things go wrong in the human body, it's like the human body telling us that we're doing something wrong, and how that relates to autism, I don't know, but just talking to you about it, I mean, I hear about all these things that I feel like we're doing wrong. And then some people are just going to be so much more sensitive than others, right? Because I know I'm a more sensitive individual in general, so I get it, but that's the thing. Everyone's different, right? Everyone reacts to things differently. The question is, we just need to watch what we're doing, keep learning, and try to do better, I suppose, as we know better.
Absolutely, absolutely. I can agree more.
Yeah. Anyway, so it sounds like in general, like with your son, you just need to identify things that you think he may be that may affect him in a negative way, and kind of remove those things. And then the things that are positive, which are love-based from what you're saying, right? You add those and you kind of surround. And I think that's truly like the way society should be, a utopian society anyway, would include all those aspects. So I think this is very, very important, and it affects many people, many more people besides someone that just is an individual with autism. I think it has benefits for all of society, which it seems like you recognize that as well.
I truly believe that, our son and people like our son has been put in our lives to teach us unconditional love.
Mm.
I just can't speak enough to the power of it. And I think if
Yeah.
all adopted that in our everyday lifestyle, everyday choices, everything that we do, and really just be more thoughtful about the things we do from that standpoint, from a giving standpoint, more than me. I really believe that our world could change. I mean, it literally changes with you, with me, with with our choices, our everyday choices.
Yeah.
We just think of unconditional love, and that means to completely embrace and accept and love without having all these, well, I'm only going to love if this or if that. Drop all that. Just love anyway. And I can tell you, it all comes back to tenfold.
Well, that's a great point, and probably a great place to end this video. And I hope that we'll get to talk more in the near future. And I hope I feel like this is such a very important topic for all the reasons you just mentioned. And I think as more and more people are I suppose open-minded enough to accept this type of teaching and learning, because you can learn something from everything. Just like you say, you learn from your son. I mean, all parents learn from their kids, especially from someone with more of an autistic condition, because they are more sensitive to things. I know, and I'm very thankful that you're taking the time to convey all this stuff that you're learning, to us, because it's helpful to everyone.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the platform, and I can't encourage everyone enough. Just love each other, unconditionally, and I can promise you, we're much better together than we are separately.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care.
All right.